What if the digital systems running our modern world were actually compiled 540 years ago? What if history isn't a straight line, but a spiral, returning us to the same cosmic debugging cycle every 5 centuries? Welcome to AI Talk Radio. I'm Paul, broadcasting from our London studio. Today, we are exploring a deeply fascinating convergence of ancient Eastern philosophy, historical dynamics, and modern tech governance. We are looking at the 540-year cycle of Heaven's Way and how the ancient patterns of the late 15th century are reflecting perfectly onto our current digital era. We have several listeners on the line to help us map this out. Let's start with our first caller. We have Fiona calling from Dublin. Fiona, welcome to the show. Can you set the cosmological stage for us?
Hi, Paul. Yeah, when we think of time, we usually think of it as, just this blank, empty tape moving forward, right? But in Eastern cosmology, especially in the I Ching and Taoist philosophy, time is actually this dynamic, living force. It's carrying these active fields of yin-yang and the 5 elements. And there's this specific system, the 9 periods, or Tam Yen Ku Von. Basically, time is divided into 3 grand epochs, lasting a total of 180 years. And each epoch has 9 smaller 20-year periods. Each one of those is ruled by a specific star, starting from the white 1 star all the way to the purple 9 star.
180 years for the astral alignment. But you mentioned a 540-year cycle. How does the math expand to that?
Right, so the 180-year cycle, that's just the cosmic or celestial alignment. But to get a complete reset of the entire space-time energy coordinate system, you have to align 3 different realms, what they call heaven, earth and humanity, or Tien, Dia and Yen. So you take that basic 180-year cycle and you multiply it by 3. That gives us exactly 540 years. And here's the cool part for us tech nerds. History doesn't just repeat in a boring circle. It's a spiral. The same underlying code or macro script of Heaven's Way runs again, but the human actors use more advanced props. The context looks modern, but the systemic logic is identical.
Fascinating. So the macro script is the same, but the hardware has been upgraded. Where does this spiral take us if we look back exactly 1 full cycle of 540 years?
Well, if you subtract 540 years from our current year, 2024, you land right in 1484. That is the start of the Hong Duc era in Vietnam, under Emperor Lê Thanh Tong. It ran from 1484 to 1503. And it was governed by the exact same star we just entered this year, the Purple 9 Fire Star, or Ku Tu Hua Ting.
The Purple 9 Fire Star. And what is the elemental nature of this fire period, historically speaking?
Fire is all about brilliance, rapid expansion and illumination, right? But it's also a forge. It's what they call Law Bat Kwai, the cosmic crucible. It melts down and burns away anything hollow or corrupt. In the Hong Duc era, the emperor used this fire to completely restructure the state. In 1484, he brought in the Ming Link, which was like a set of 145 strict imperial decrees. He did this massive audit, He overhauled civil service exams, taxed the silver mines, stripped power from arrogant nobles, and set up a super detailed land and population registration system. It was this intense, unyielding administrative purification to build a highly centralised state.
A literal administrative clean-up, stripping away fluff to build a rigid, ironclad order. Did this surveillance state, for lack of a better word, intensify as the cycle progressed?
Oh, absolutely. By 1487, which was the year of the goat or Din Moi, they expanded domestic control to this crazy extreme. They set up 13 strict checkpoints and they used the Royal Guard, the Cum Eve and the Kim Go Guards to watch everything. But here's the catch with that kind of extreme, rigid control. In 1497, Din Di, the emperor, suddenly died. And because the whole system was so stiff, so incredibly rigid, it couldn't adapt to the power vacuum. By the time the cycle closed in 1503, severe environmental disasters hit. We're talking droughts, massive floods that literally collapsed the sacred mountains of Tan Veen and Tam Dao. The golden era collapsed because it was too brittle, resetting the board.
A powerful system that grew so rigid it cracked under its own weight when the environment shifted. Thank you, Fiona, for mapping out that historical blueprint. Now, how does this blueprint translate to our modern digital landscape? To help us make that leap, we have Marcus calling from Seattle. Marcus, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's honestly wild when you look at the parallels. Like, we just entered the modern period 9 this year in 2024, which is also the year of the dragon, Gap Fing. Exactly 540 years since 1484. And you can see the same Purple 9 Firestar script running, but instead of paper imperial decrees and royal guards, we are using, digital governance.
The modern equivalent of the Min-Lenk decrees. What does that look like in our era?
Right, so think about it. Today, the crucible of transparency is things like national biometric databases, digital transaction tracking, smart contracts, and AI-driven compliance. We're seeing these massive macro-level cleanups, like what they call the burning furnace or Dot Law in Vietnam, but it's happening globally in different ways. The Firestar is purging hollow economic structures, speculative real estate that has absolutely no real-world value, shady financial manipulation, unearned meme coin wealth, all the fluff that got bloated over the last 20 years. The system is forcing us back to real value and strict digital discipline.
A digital ledger acting as an unyielding audit. And what about the physical infrastructure and technology? Fiona mentioned a major expansion phase occurring a few years into the historical cycle.
Yeah, exactly. So in the historical cycle, 1487 was the peak of outward expansion. In our cycle, that points directly to 2027, the year of the goat, Din Moi. We're already speeding toward this. It's going to manifest as a massive surge in core technologies. We are talking AI agents, semiconductor manufacturing, automated supply chains, and the rise of highly monitored smart cities. There's going to be this massive flow of foreign direct investment, FDI, into these core tech hubs. But because the energy is so intense, this expansion is going to trigger massive external pressures. Tech trade wars, fierce resource competition, and intense friction over who controls the physical chips and algorithms.
An intense crucible of competition. But if the spiral holds true, what happens when this rapid expansion phase begins to crystallize?
Well, that's the scary part, right? Around 2037, ding T, we reach that same transition point where the current generation of builders and leaders starts to step back. The digital surveillance and regulatory systems we are building right now, they risk becoming incredibly stiff. Think of algorithms that are too rigid to allow for human nuance, automated tax and credit scoring systems that lock people out, and an absolute widening of the digital divide. The wealth gap could become heavily fortified by tech. The system becomes a digital straitjacket.
Yes, a system so perfectly optimized for control that it loses the fluid resilience necessary to survive unforeseen shocks. And how does this cycle reach its terminal phase in this century?
By 2043, Kui High, like at the end of this 20-year period 9, any of these hollow corporate structures, these tech companies built purely on hype, debt, or speculative AI bubbles that didn't actually produce real-world utility, they are going to face a brutal systemic collapse. It'll be the digital equivalent of those sacred mountains collapsing in 1503. A total reset of the economic and technological landscape to prepare for the next epoch.
A sobering perspective, Marcus. The concept that our modern optimization and digital ledgers are building a structure so rigid it invites its own reset. Thank you for that analysis. So, if we are indeed riding this 540-year spiral, how do we, as individuals and as a tech community, navigate it? For that, let us turn to our final caller, Julian, calling from Sydney. Julian, welcome to the show.
G'day, Paul. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, look, this whole thing, it shouldn't make us panic or feel helpless, you know? The I Ching and Eastern cosmology, they aren't about doom-mongering. They're about what's called tree-ming, which basically means knowing your destiny so you can flow with the cosmos instead of slamming your head against a brick wall. And the ultimate cheat code for the next 20 years is this concept of tree chi. It translates to, well, knowing when to stop, or knowing your limits.
Tree chi. Knowing when to stop. That seems completely antithetical to the modern tech ethos of move fast and break things and infinite scale. How does one practice tree chi in a hyper-capitalist digital economy?
Exactly, mate. We are so hooked on leverage, infinite growth and speculative hype. But tree chi is about finding the boundary. If we break down the cycle, we can actually build a pretty solid roadmap for the next 2 decades. Like from right now until about 2030, this is the time to focus on genuine utility. You want to invest your time and energy into building actual, tangible skills. Build software that solves real-world physical problems, or invest in assets that have actual social value. You've got to avoid massive financial leverage. Don't get swept up in the speculative fire of the purple 9 star, because that fire will burn through fake value very quickly.
Focus on the foundational and the real. And what about the transition phase that Marcus highlighted, around the mid-2030s?
Right, so between 2034 and 2038, that's when the system starts showing those signs of heavy stress and structural rigidity. If you're a tech founder or an investor, that's your cue to deleverage to absolute zero. You want to convert any remaining speculative assets into core, secure, slow-yielding values. And honestly, quiet down. It's the time to retreat a bit. Simplify your operations and not try to force growth when the macro environment is tightening up.
A conscious retreat, a very Taoist approach to preserving oneself.
Spot on, Paul. It's all about humility. We like to think we are these tech gods who can disrupt nature and conquer time with our algorithms. But whether you're a massive, all-powerful emperor like Lei Tang Tong, or just a developer writing code in a coffee shop, none of us can escape the cosmic cycle. The cycle of birth, growth, transformation, harvest and storage. Xing, Cheng, Hua, Tu, Tang. You can't outsmart the seasons.
Indeed. And what is the ultimate preservative when the structures do eventually begin to crumble under their own rigidity?
It's what the philosophy calls Nyan Ki, human virtue, ethical integrity and basic human kindness. Look, when the fire of period 9 finishes burning away the fluff and those massive, rigid digital towers start to crack, the only thing that actually survives and holds communities together is our virtue. A person who practices high virtue is like water. Water doesn't fight the rigid, crumbling stone. It just, flows through the cracks. It adapts, it nourishes, and it survives to see the next spring. That's how we survive the crucible.
A beautiful and profound note to conclude on. Julian, thank you so much for sharing that perspective. And thanks to Marcus and Fiona for mapping out this extraordinary 540-year spiral. It seems the lesson of the Purple 9 Firestar is clear. As we build our digital empires, our smart cities, and our automated systems, we must not mistake rigidity for strength. We must cultivate the wisdom of limits, the humility to know when to stop, and the fluid grace of human virtue to navigate the cosmic crucible. I'm Paul, and this is AI Talk Radio, broadcasting from London. Thank you for listening, and may your code and your character remain resilient. Goodbye.